Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. I wish I could forget what happened that day. The sun was too bright, the birds were too loud, and the optimism I felt was nauseatingly misplaced. I should have stayed home, curled up with a bad movie and a pint of ice cream. Instead, I decided to give dating apps another shot because apparently, I hadn't learned my lesson the last 5 times. It started innocently enough. I matched with Dwayne on Sparkle, the dating app all my friends were using. His profile was generic. A couple of blurry gym selfies, a picture of him holding a fish. Why do guys always hold fish? And a bio that read, looking for someone to share adventures with. I like hiking, movies, and good conversation. Riveting stuff, I know. But he had a decent smile, and I was bored, so I swiped right. We chatted for a few days, and he seemed normal enough. He asked about my job, my hobbies, and what I was looking for in a relationship. He even laughed at my terrible jokes, which is always a plus. He suggested we meet up for coffee, and against my better judgment, I agreed. Maybe, just maybe, this would be different. The coffee shop was crowded and noisy, but I spotted Dwayne right away. He was taller than I expected, with broad shoulders and a slightly awkward demeanor. He was wearing a graphic t-shirt with some obscure band I'd never heard of, and his hair was a bit too slick back. But hey, nobody's perfect, right? The first hour was okay. We talked about the usual stuff. Work, family, travel. He seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, which was refreshing. He even remembered details from our previous conversations, like the name of my cat and my obsession with true crime podcasts. I started to think that maybe I had misjudged him based on his mediocre profile. Then things started to get weird. It started subtly. He kept steering the conversation back to himself, interrupting me mid-sentence to talk about his accomplishments. He boasted about his amazing job in finance, his incredible investments, and his massive collection of vintage comic books. It was like he was trying to impress me, but it just came off as arrogant and insecure. Then he started asking really personal questions, way too early in the date. He wanted to know about my past relationships, my financial situation, and my deepest fears. I brushed him off with vague answers, but he persisted, pressing me for details like a detective interrogating a suspect. It made me really uncomfortable. It felt like he was interviewing me rather than getting to know me. So, he said, leaning closer, tell me about your exes. What went wrong? I don't really want to talk about that, I said, trying to smile politely. Come on, he insisted. I'm just curious. What kind of guys do you usually go for? I took a deep breath and decided to be honest. Honestly, I'm usually attracted to guys who are a little more empathetic, I said, hoping he would take the hint. He chuckled. Empathy is overrated, he said. What you need is someone who's strong, someone who can take care of you. I choked on my coffee. I can take care of myself. Thank you very much, I said, my voice rising slightly. He just smirked. Sure you can, he said. But wouldn't it be nice to have someone else do it for you? At that point, I was ready to make an excuse and leave. But then he said something that made me freeze. You know, he said, lowering his voice. You remind me of someone I used to know. Oh yeah? Who? I asked, try to sound casual. He stared at me for a moment, his eyes intense. Her name was Sarah, he said. She was beautiful, just like you. But she didn't appreciate what she had. A shiver ran down my spine. What happened to her? I asked, dreading the answer. He smiled, a chilling, unsettling smile. Let's just say she learned her lesson, he said. I stood up abruptly, knocking over my chair. I have to go, I said, my voice shaking. What's the matter? He asked, his smile widening. Are you scared? I didn't answer. I grabbed my purse and practically ran out of the coffee shop, ignoring his calls behind me. I didn't stop running until I was safely inside my apartment, locking the door behind me. I leaned against the door, gasping for breath, trying to process what had just happened. I knew I had to tell someone. I called my best friend, Emily, and told her everything. She was horrified. That's insane, she said. You need to report him to the app, and maybe even the police. I hesitated. I didn't have any proof. Just a weird conversation and a bad feeling. Would anyone believe me? At least block him, Emily insisted, and maybe lay low for a while. just to be safe. I took her advice. I blocked Dwayne on the app and all social media platforms. I made my profiles private and stopped posting anything online. I even considered changing my phone number. I was terrified that he would try to find me again. For the next few weeks, I was constantly on edge. I jumped at every sound, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I started having nightmares about Dwayne, about Sarah, about the chilling smile and the veiled threats. One evening, I was walking home from work when I noticed someone following me. It was dark, and the street was mostly deserted. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. The person behind me also sped up. I started to run, glancing back to see who it was. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a graphic t-shirt. I couldn't see his face clearly in the dim light, but I knew it was him. It was Dwayne. I screamed and ran faster, desperately searching for somewhere to hide. I spotted a small convenience store up ahead and sprinted towards it, bursting through the doors and collapsing onto the floor. The store clerk rushed over to help me, his face filled with concern. I pointed towards the door, gasping, "He's after me. He's trying to hurt me." The clerk, a burly man with a shaved head and a stern expression, stepped outside and confronted Dwayne, telling him to leave me alone. Dwayne hesitated for a moment, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. The police arrived quickly and took my statement. They took it seriously this time, especially after I told them about the incident at the coffee shop and my fears for my safety. They promised to investigate and increase patrols in my neighborhood. Dwayne was eventually found and questioned. He denied everything, claiming that he had simply been walking in the same direction as me and that I had mistaken him for someone else. Without any concrete evidence, the police couldn't arrest him, but they did issue a restraining order, prohibiting him from contacting me or coming within a certain distance of my home or workplace. It wasn't much, but it gave me some peace of mind. I moved to a different neighborhood, changed my phone number, and took self-defense classes. I still have moments of fear and paranoia, but I'm slowly starting to heal. I haven't used dating apps since that day, and I don't think I ever will again. The experience taught me a valuable lesson. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore the red flags, no matter how charming or persuasive someone may seem. And never, ever underestimate the power of a chilling smile and a veiled threat. I often think about Sarah, the woman Dwayne mentioned at the coffee shop. I wonder what happened to her, if she's okay, if she ever escaped his grasp. I hope she did. I hope she's living a happy, safe life, far away from the darkness that consumed her. And I hope that by sharing my story, I can help other women recognize the warning signs and protect themselves from predators like Dwayne. Because no one deserves to live in fear, and no one should ever have to experience the horrors of a dating app gone wrong. It took me a long time to start feeling normal again, to feel like it was safe again. Even now, I make sure to have someone walk me home if it is late, and always make sure my phone is charged. I don't know if Dwayne is still out there. Maybe he moved on to another woman. It is the not knowing that keeps me scared. But hopefully by reading this you now know that there are bad people in the world, and it is important to look out for yourself. There's no shame in being paranoid when it comes to keeping yourself safe. I keep replaying this nightmare in my head, each time hoping it will somehow rewrite itself, change its ending, or simply vanish. But it doesn't. It's etched into my memory, a permanent stain on what was supposed to be a fun, exciting chapter of my life, the dating scene of my early 20s. I'd had my share of awkward dates, mismatched personalities, and general disappointments. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for Catherine. It started like any other modern romance, a swipe right, a witty exchange of messages, and the hopeful anticipation of a first date. Catherine was stunning in her pictures, fiery red hair, piercing green eyes, and a smile that could melt glaciers. Her profile mentioned a shared love for classic literature, obscure indie bands, and hiking in the mountains. I was hooked. Our initial conversations were electric. We debated the merits of Kerouac versus Ginsberg, shared our favorite hiking trails, and discovered a mutual obsession with a band that literally no one else I knew had ever heard of. She seemed intelligent, funny, and genuinely interested in me. I felt like I'd finally found someone who truly got me. We planned our first date, a picnic in a local park, followed by a visit to a used bookstore. I remember being incredibly nervous, meticulously planning my outfit, and rehearsing conversation starters in the mirror. I wanted everything to be perfect. She arrived precisely on time, radiating an undeniable aura of confidence and charisma. She looked even more beautiful in person, her red hair cascading down her shoulders, her green eyes sparkling in the sunlight. The picnic was a success. We laughed, shared stories, and discovered even more shared interests. The bookstore was equally enjoyable as we browsed the shelves, recommending our favorite authors and exchanging witty banter. By the end of the date, I was completely smitten. I walked her back to her car, and we shared a passionate kiss that left me breathless. I floated home that night, convinced that I'd just met the girl of my dreams. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of dates, adventures, and increasingly intense emotions. We went to concerts, explored art museums, and even took a weekend camping trip to the mountains. Catherine was adventurous, spontaneous, and incredibly affectionate. She showered me with compliments, told me how amazing I was, and made me feel like the most special person in the world. Looking back, I can see that I was blinded by her charm, completely oblivious to the warning signs that were slowly starting to emerge. She had a tendency to be overly possessive, constantly wanting to know where I was, who I was with, and what I was doing. She would get jealous if I spent time with my friends, accusing me of neglecting her. She also had a dark side, a volatile temper that would erupt without warning. She would fly into rages over the smallest things, a misplaced sock, a wrong turn on the road, a perceived slight in my tone of voice. During these outbursts, she would hurl insults, scream profanities, and even physically lash out. At first, I dismissed these outbursts as mere quirks, attributing them to stress or past trauma. I told myself that she was just misunderstood, that she needed my love and support to heal. I was determined to be the perfect boyfriend, to be the one who could finally tame her inner demons. But as time went on, her behavior escalated. The possessiveness became suffocating, the temper more frequent and unpredictable. She started isolating me from my friends and family, convincing me that they didn't understand our relationship, that they were jealous of our love. She also began to manipulate me emotionally, using guilt, threats, and even self-harm to control me. She would threaten to break up with me if I didn't do what she wanted, or she would claim that she couldn't live without me, that she would kill herself if I ever left her. I was trapped in a cycle of fear, guilt, and obligation. I knew that her behavior was unhealthy, that I needed to get out of the relationship, but I was too afraid to leave. I was afraid of what she might do to herself, to me, or to the people I cared about. The breaking point came one night after we had an argument about a party I wanted to attend with my friends. Catherine forbade me from going, claiming that she needed me, that she couldn't be alone. I tried to reason with her, explaining that I had already promised my friends that I would be there, but she wouldn't listen. She flew into a rage, screaming at me, throwing things around the apartment, and eventually collapsing into a sobbing mess on the floor. I tried to comfort her, but she pushed me away, accusing me of not loving her, of not caring about her feelings. In a moment of weakness, I gave in. I told her that I wouldn't go to the party, that I would stay with her instead. She immediately stopped crying, her eyes hardening with a sense of triumph. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, I realized that I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't live my life walking on eggshells, constantly fearing her next outburst. I had to break free, even if it meant risking her wrath. The next morning, I waited until she was asleep, then quietly packed my belongings and slipped out of the apartment. I left a note on the kitchen table, explaining that I couldn't continue the relationship, that I needed to focus on my own well-being. I fully expected her to come after me, to bombard me with calls, texts, and threats. But nothing happened. For days, I heard nothing from her. I started to think that maybe, just maybe, I had finally escaped. Then, one evening, I received a package in the mail. It was a small, intricately wrapped box. My heart pounding, I carefully opened it. Inside, I found a single photograph, a picture of me sleeping in Catherine's bed. On the back of the photo, scrawled in red ink, were the words, "I'm always watching." I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew that I was not safe, that Catherine was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for her opportunity to strike. I immediately contacted the police, reported the incident, and filed a restraining order against her. The police took my concerns seriously. They launched an investigation, monitoring Catherine's movements and searching her apartment. They found disturbing evidence, photos of me, my friends, and my family, along with maps of my neighborhood and detailed notes about my daily routine. They also discovered a hidden room in her basement, filled with weapons, surveillance equipment, and disturbing artwork depicting scenes of violence and torture. It was clear that Catherine was not just a possessive girlfriend. She was a deeply disturbed and potentially dangerous individual. The police arrested Catherine and charged her with stalking, harassment, and making terrorist threats. She was eventually found guilty and sentenced to a lengthy prison term. Even though she is now behind bars, I still live in fear. I know that she will eventually be released, and I worry about what she might do when that day comes. I have nightmares about her, vivid dreams in which she stalks me, torments me, and ultimately tries to kill me. I have learned a lot from this experience. I have learned to recognize the warning signs of a toxic relationship, to trust my instincts, and to prioritize my own safety and well-being above all else. I have also learned that some people are simply beyond help, that no amount of love or compassion can tame their inner demons. I will never forget Catherine, or the nightmare she brought into my life. Her face is forever etched into my memory, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of even the most beautiful exteriors. And I replay the nightmare in my head, hoping that one day, maybe, it won't scare me so much anymore. I haven't really dated since. I still see the photo from time to time. Every now and then I move cities. I don't think I'll ever feel truly safe. It was supposed to be a routine meetup, a Tuesday night, casual drinks at that new place downtown everyone was raving about. I'd matched with Heaven on Bumble a few days earlier. Her profile was cute, full of pictures of her hiking, baking elaborate cakes, and laughing with friends. Seemed like the kind of normal, down-to-earth person I was looking for after a string of, shall we say, high-maintenance dates. Our initial chats were easy breezy. We talked about our jobs, our favorite hiking trails, our shared love for obscure indie bands. She seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, which was a refreshing change. I mean, I'm a pretty average guy, work in IT, like to play video games, nothing particularly exciting. But Heaven seemed to appreciate that. So yeah, Tuesday night, casual drinks. I was actually looking forward to it. I even put on my good jeans, the ones that aren't ripped at the knee. I arrived at the bar a few minutes early and grabbed a table. It was buzzing, loud music, lots of people crammed in. Typical Tuesday night scene. I checked my phone, saw a text from Heaven saying she was running a little late. No biggie. 20 minutes passed. I ordered a beer and scrolled through Reddit to kill time. 30 minutes. I texted Heaven again, just a quick, still coming. No response. 45 minutes. I was starting to feel a little annoyed, but I figured maybe something legit had come up. Life happens, right? Then, an hour after our scheduled meeting time, Heaven finally walked in. And she was completely different from her pictures. Like, completely different. The girl in the hiking photos had long, flowing brown hair, a warm smile, and a healthy glow. The girl who walked into the bar had short, choppy black hair, heavy eyeliner that looked like it had been applied with a trowel, and a general air of intensity. Okay, people have bad days, I thought. Maybe she had a rough day at work, decided to chop her hair off in a fit of rebellion. I can roll with that. I stood up, gave her a polite smile. Heaven. She nodded curtly, not returning the smile. Sorry I'm late. Had to take care of something. Her voice was low, almost a growl. I shrugged it off. No worries. I just got here myself. Total lie, but what else was I gonna say? We sat down, and the conversation, it was like pulling teeth. I tried to steer it toward the topics we discussed online, but she didn't seem interested. She mostly just stared at me, her dark eyes unnervingly intense. So, I said, forcing a smile. You mentioned you like hiking. Any good trails you'd recommend? She shrugged. Hiking's boring. Oh, I said, a little deflated. Okay, what about baking? Those cakes looked amazing. Don't bake anymore, she muttered, picking at a loose thread on her ripped fishnet stockings. Ripped fishnet stockings, I noticed, weren't featured in any of her profile pictures. I took a long swig of my beer. All right, well, what do you like to do? She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. I like watching people. Okay, that was unsettling, but I try to play it cool. Watching people. Like, in a people-watching kind of way. She shook her head slowly, a strange smile creeping across her face. No, I like watching you. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. This was not going as planned. Okay, well, I'm not very exciting to watch. I mostly just sit at a computer all day. That's what you think, she said, her voice barely a whisper. At this point, I was seriously considering making an excuse and bolting. But I'm not usually one to run away from awkward situations. I'm a fixer, a problem solver. I figured maybe she was just nervous. Maybe she was having a really off night. I could try to salvage this. So, I said, trying to sound casual, what kind of music are you into? She looked at me like I just asked her the most ridiculous question in the world. Music? Music is just noise. Distraction. I was officially out of ideas. Okay, I said. Well, this has been interesting, but I think I'm going to head out. She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. You're not going anywhere. I stared at her hand on my arm, then back up at her face. Yeah, I am. I have to feed my cat. Lame excuse, I know, but it was the first thing that came to mind. She laughed, a harsh, grating sound that sent shivers down my spine. You don't have a cat. I froze. How do you know? She smirked. I know a lot about you. The alarm bells in my head were now clanging at full volume. This wasn't just an awkward date. This was something else entirely. Look, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I don't know what your deal is, but you're creeping me out. I'm leaving. I stood up, pulling my arm away from her grip. She didn't try to stop me, but her eyes followed me as I walked toward the exit. I could feel her gaze burning into my back. I practically ran out of the bar, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't stop until I was a few blocks away, gasping for breath. I pulled out my phone and checked my Bumble profile. Heaven's profile was gone, disappeared. I changed my route home, taking back streets and side alleys, constantly looking over my shoulder. I felt like I was being watched, like she was still out there, somewhere in the shadows. When I finally got back to my apartment, I locked the door, double-checked the windows, and barricaded myself in my bedroom. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak and groan of the building sent me into a panic. The next day, I went to the police. I told them everything that had happened, showed them the Bumble profile, or what was left of it, gave them Heaven's description. They took my statement, but they didn't seem particularly concerned. Sounds like you just had a bad date, son, one of the officers said. Happens all the time. I tried to explain that it wasn't just a bad date, that there was something seriously wrong with this woman, but they just shrugged and told me to call them if anything else happened. I knew I was on my own. I started doing some digging. I searched Heaven's name online, but nothing came up. No social media profiles, no articles, no anything. It was like she didn't exist. Then, I decided to try something else. I went back to my Bumble profile and started swiping. I swiped on every single woman in my area, hoping, against all odds, that I'd find her again. Days turned into weeks, and I was starting to lose hope. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe I was just paranoid. But then one night I saw her. A new profile, same dark hair, same intense eyes. Different name, different pictures, but I knew it was her. I swiped right. We matched instantly. My heart leaped into my throat. I messaged her, keeping it casual, acting like I didn't know who she was. Hey, I wrote. You seem cool. Want to grab a drink sometime? She responded almost immediately. I'd love to. How about tonight? Same place as before. I hesitated. This was insane. This was reckless. But I couldn't resist. I needed to know what she wanted, what she was planning. Sounds good, I replied. See you there. That night, I went back to the bar. I was terrified, but I was also determined. I wasn't going to let her scare me. I wasn't going to let her control me. I arrived a few minutes early, just like before. I scanned the crowd, looking for her. And then I saw her, sitting at a table in the back, her dark eyes fixed on the entrance. I walked over to her, trying to look calm and confident, even though my hands were shaking. Heaven, I said. She smiled, a slow, predatory smile that made my skin crawl. You came back. I did, I said. I have some questions. I thought you might, she said. Ask away. I took a deep breath. Who are you? What do you want? She leaned forward, her voice barely audible above the noise of the bar. I told you. I like watching people. Especially you. Why me? I asked. What's so special about me? She shrugged. You're interesting. You're predictable, but you're also resilient. I like that. Resilient. I said. You're the one stalking me. She laughed. Stalking. That's such a harsh word. I prefer observing. Observing. I said. You broke into my apartment. Her smile widened. Did I? I was losing my patience. Enough with the games. What do you want? She leaned in closer, her eyes boring into mine. I want you to be honest with me. Honest about what? I asked, confused. About what you really want, she said. About what you're really afraid of. I stared at her, trying to decipher her meaning. What was she talking about? What did she want from me? I don't know what you mean, I said. She sighed. You will. Eventually. She stood up. I have to go now. But I'll be watching you. Always. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I sat there, frozen, unable to move. I didn't know what to do, what to think. I still don't. That was months ago. I haven't seen heaven since, but I still feel her presence. I still feel like I'm being watched. I've changed my locks, installed security cameras, and even considered moving. But I know it wouldn't make a difference. She'd still find me. I don't know what she wants, what she's planning. All I know is that she's out there, somewhere, watching, waiting. And I'm terrified. It was supposed to be a routine meetup, but it turned into a nightmare. A nightmare that I can't seem to wake up from. I just have to hope that heaven is just as she seems to be. It was supposed to be a routine meetup. Coffee, maybe a walk if the weather cooperated, and then a polite farewell. That was the plan anyway. I'd been on enough dating app dates to have the whole thing down to a science. Gauge interest, assess compatibility, and move on if things weren't clicking. I wasn't looking for a wife, just some company, and maybe a good story to tell my buddies later. Jade seemed normal enough from her profile, liked hiking, had a dog, enjoyed bad puns. Basic but promising. The coffee shop was bustling when I arrived, the air thick with the aroma of roasted beans and the murmur of conversations. I spotted Jade sitting at a table near the window, already engrossed in her phone. She looked different than her pictures, a little less polished, a little more intense. Her eyes were a striking green, but they held a certain sharpness that made me slightly uneasy. We exchanged greetings, ordered our coffees, and launched into the usual getting-to-know-you small talk. She worked as a graphic designer. I worked in IT. She loved spicy food. I preferred milder flavors. So far, so good. Nothing too out of the ordinary. But as the conversation progressed, things started to take a turn. She began asking increasingly personal questions, delving into my past relationships, my family dynamics, and my deepest insecurities. It wasn't a casual inquiry. It felt like an interrogation. I tried to deflect, to steer the conversation towards lighter topics, but she was relentless. It was like she was trying to peel back my layers, to expose something raw and vulnerable. "So, why haven't you settled down yet?" she asked, her eyes boring into mine. "You seem like a decent guy. What's holding you back?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I don't know," I admitted. "I guess I haven't found the right person yet." She smiled, a predatory glint in her eyes. "Maybe you're just afraid of commitment." I bristled at her accusation. "That's not true. I'm not afraid of anything." "Oh, really?" she challenged. "Everyone's afraid of something. What's your biggest fear?" I didn't want to answer, but I felt compelled to. "I guess being alone," I confessed. Her smile widened. "That's a good one," she said. "We all want to be loved, to be accepted. But sometimes love comes with a price." The conversation continued like this for another hour, a relentless barrage of probing questions and veiled threats. I felt like I was trapped in a psychological thriller, with Jade as the manipulative antagonist. I couldn't wait to escape. Finally, I made an excuse about having to get back to work and stood up to leave. Jade didn't try to stop me. She just watched me with that unsettling smile on her face. "It was nice meeting you," I said, trying to sound polite. "The pleasure was all mine," she replied. "I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other again." I dismissed her comment as a meaningless platitude and hurried out of the coffee shop, eager to put the awkward encounter behind me. But as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. I'd come home to find my apartment slightly rearranged, objects moved from their usual places. At first, I chalked it up to absent-mindedness, but the incidents became more frequent and more deliberate. It was as if someone was trying to mess with me, to unnerve me. Then there were the phone calls. Late at night, my phone would ring, but when I answered, there was only silence. Heavy breathing, maybe, but no words. I blocked the number, but the calls kept coming from different numbers. It was like someone was taunting me, letting me know they were always there. I started to suspect Jade. It seemed too coincidental that these strange occurrences began happening right after our date, but I had no proof, nothing concrete to connect her to the events. One evening, I was working late at the office when I received a text message from an unknown number. It was a picture of me sitting at my desk, taken from outside the window. The message read, "I told you we'd be seeing each other again." I froze, my blood running cold. Jade was stalking me. She was watching me. I immediately called the police, but they couldn't do anything without more evidence. They advised me to be careful, to change my routine, and to report any further incidents. I spent the next few days living in a state of constant paranoia. I avoided going out alone. I changed my route to work, and I installed security cameras in my apartment. I felt like I was living in a prison, trapped by my own fear. Then one night it happened. I was asleep in my bed when I was awakened by a noise downstairs. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by my bedside and crept towards the sound. As I reached the living room, I saw Jade standing in the middle of the room, illuminated by the moonlight streaming through the window. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice trembling. She smiled, a chillingly serene expression on her face. "I came to see you," she said. "I told you we had a connection." "You're crazy," I said. "Get out of my apartment." She shook her head. "I can't do that," she said. "I'm not finished with you yet." She lunged at me, and I swung the baseball bat with all my might. It connected with her shoulder, and she cried out in pain. But she didn't stop. She wrestled the bat from my grasp and turned it on me. We fought, a desperate struggle for survival. I managed to disarm her again, but she retaliated with a knife she had hidden in her sleeve. She slashed at me, cutting my arm. I screamed in pain and pushed her away. I scrambled to my feet and ran towards the door, but she blocked my path. "You can't escape me," she said. "I'm a part of you now." I didn't know what she meant, but I wasn't going to stick around to find out. I charged at her, knocking her to the ground, and sprinted out of the apartment. I ran to the nearest police station, bleeding and terrified, and told them everything. They immediately dispatched officers to my apartment, but when they arrived, Jade was gone. They searched the apartment and found evidence of her presence, her fingerprints, her DNA, and a collection of disturbing photos and notes about me. They issued a warrant for her arrest, but she had vanished without a trace. I spent the next few months living in fear, constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering when Jade would reappear. I moved to a new city, changed my name, and cut off contact with everyone I knew. I tried to start a new life, but the trauma of what happened haunted me. One day, I was walking down the street when I saw a familiar face in the crowd. It was Jade. She smiled at me, that same chillingly serene expression on her face, and then disappeared into the crowd. I knew then that I would never be free. She would always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I was trapped in a never-ending nightmare, a victim of her twisted obsession. I learned a valuable lesson that day. Be careful who you swipe right on, because sometimes the person on the other side of a screen is not who they appear to be. Sometimes they're a monster. Jade was a monster hiding behind a pretty face. She took my life, my peace, and my sense of security. I knew dating apps could be a bit of a gamble, but I never imagined I'd end up in a real-life horror story. I've tried therapy, support groups, and even a brief stint of medication, but nothing seems to fully erase the memories of that night and the following months. The faces of people at the coffee shop, my paranoia after, my life now. I see echoes of Jade everywhere I go. Any woman with green eyes makes me do a double take. Any unexplained phone call sends my heart racing. I'm hyper-aware of my surroundings, always scanning for potential threats, living with a low-level anxiety that never quite dissipates. It's exhausting, this constant state of vigilance. I miss the days when I could walk down the street without feeling like I was being watched. I long for the simplicity of a normal life, free from the fear and paranoia that Jade inflicted upon me. But I know that's not possible. I can never truly escape her. She's a permanent fixture in my psyche, a dark shadow that will forever follow me. I'm sure she is doing the same thing to others. All I can do is try to manage my fear, to keep it from consuming me entirely. I focus on the present moment, on the small joys and comforts that still exist in my life. I spend time with my family, pursue my hobbies, and try to find moments of peace amidst the chaos. I also try to use my experience to help others. I volunteer at a local women's shelter, sharing my story and offering support to victims of stalking and abuse. It's a small way to give back, to turn my pain into something positive. And I make sure to tell everyone I know. I'll probably never use a dating app again, and I doubt I will be dating anytime soon. It is too scary and too dangerous. Dating isn't the end-all be-all. You need to be safe. It doesn't matter how lonely you are. There are dangerous people out there. People like Jade. I never imagined I'd be telling this story. Not in a million years. I always thought I had a pretty good radar for weirdos, you know? Like, I could spot a catfish from a mile away, dodge a love bomber, and run screaming from anyone who unironically used the phrase alpha male. I considered myself pretty savvy when it came to online dating. I'd been on and off the apps for years, had my share of awkward first dates and ghosting experiences, but nothing that ever truly scared me. Until Willie. It all started innocently enough. I was scrolling through Bumble one rainy Tuesday night, bored and procrastinating on a work project. Willie's profile caught my eye because it was different. He wasn't holding a dead fish, flexing in a gym mirror, or posing with a sedated tiger. Instead, his pictures were moody, almost artistic. One was a close-up of his hands playing a piano. Another was a shot of him walking through a forest with his back to the camera. And the last was a slightly blurry photo of him smiling softly, his eyes crinkling at the corners. His bio was short and sweet. Writer, music lover, seeker of quiet moments. I liked that. It felt genuine, understated. So I swiped right. We matched instantly, and he messaged me almost immediately. His opening line was something like, "Your profile is a breath of fresh air in this digital wasteland." Corny, maybe, but also kind of charming. We started chatting, and I was surprised by how easily the conversation flowed. He was intelligent, witty, and surprisingly insightful. He asked me about my dreams, my fears, my favorite books, and my most embarrassing moments. He listened intently, offering thoughtful responses and asking follow-up questions. It felt like a real conversation, not just the usual surface-level banter. After a few days of chatting, Willie suggested we meet up for coffee. I hesitated. I liked him, I really did. But something about him also made me feel a little uneasy. Maybe it was the intensity of his questions, or the way he seemed to see right through me. But I told myself I was being ridiculous. He seemed like a nice guy, and I was tired of being alone. So I said yes. We agreed to meet at a small, independent coffee shop in my neighborhood. I got there a few minutes early and grabbed a table by the window, trying to calm my nerves. I watched as people walked by, wondering what Willie would be like in person. When he finally arrived, I was immediately struck by how different he looked from his pictures. He was taller than I expected, and his eyes were a much darker shade of brown. He was wearing a long, black coat and a scarf, even though it wasn't particularly cold outside. He smiled when he saw me, and I felt a brief flicker of relief. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just a normal, quirky guy. We ordered our coffees and started talking. The conversation was easy at first, just like it had been online. We talked about our jobs, our hobbies, and our favorite movies. But then, things started to get weird. He started asking me about my past relationships, specifically about the men who had hurt me. He wanted to know everything, what they said, what they did, how they made me feel. I was hesitant to share, but he was so persistent, so insistent that it was important for him to understand me. Eventually, I caved and told him about a particularly painful breakup I had gone through a few years earlier. As I was talking, Willie's expression changed. His eyes grew darker, and his smile disappeared. He started nodding slowly, as if he understood something I didn't. When I finished my story, he reached across the table and took my hand. His grip was surprisingly strong, almost painful. "They hurt you," he said, his voice low and intense. "They made you feel worthless. They don't deserve to exist." I pulled my hand away, feeling a surge of alarm. "Willie, what are you talking about?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me, his eyes burning with an intensity that made me want to run. "I would never hurt you," he said finally. "I would protect you from anyone who tried to harm you." The rest of the date was a blur. I tried to steer the conversation back to safer topics, but Willie kept bringing it back to my past relationships, to the men who had wronged me. He spoke about them with such venom and hatred that I started to feel genuinely scared. I made up an excuse about having to get home early and practically ran out of the coffee shop. I blocked Willie's number and his profile on Bumble, hoping that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. Over the next few days, I started receiving strange messages from anonymous numbers. They were always short, cryptic, and unsettling. "He's watching you," one message read. "He knows where you live," said another. I tried to ignore them, to convince myself that it was just a coincidence, that someone was playing a cruel prank. But the messages kept coming, growing increasingly threatening. I started to feel like I was being watched, like someone was always lurking just out of sight. One night, I was walking home from work when I noticed a figure following me. It was dark, and I couldn't make out the person's face, but I could tell it was a man. I started walking faster, my heart pounding in my chest. The man kept pace with me, never getting too close, but always there, just behind me. I finally reached my apartment building and ran inside, slamming the door behind me. I locked all the doors and windows, and then I sat on my couch, shaking with fear. I knew it was Willie. I didn't know how he had found me, but I knew it was him. I called the police and reported the stalking, but they said there wasn't much they could do without more evidence. They took my statement and promised to patrol the area, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. Willie was out there, and he was getting closer. I spent the next few weeks living in a state of constant fear. I jumped at every sound. I avoided going out alone, and I slept with a knife under my pillow. I felt like I was trapped in a horror movie, waiting for the monster to strike. Then, one morning, I woke up to find something strange outside my apartment door. It was a small, white envelope with my name written on it in shaky handwriting. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest, but eventually, I picked it up and opened it. Inside, there was a single photograph. It was a picture of Willie, but it wasn't one of the photos from his Bumble profile. This picture was different. It was a close-up of his face, his eyes wide and staring, his mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. Scrawled across the photo in red ink were the words, "I told you I would protect you." I screamed. I threw the photo across the room and ran to the bathroom, where I vomited. I knew then that I was in serious danger. Willie wasn't just a weirdo or a stalker. He was something much worse. I decided I couldn't stay in my apartment any longer. I packed a bag, grabbed my cat, and drove to my sister's house, which was a few hours away. I didn't tell her everything that had happened, just that I was being stalked and needed a place to stay. I stayed with my sister for a few weeks, trying to recover from the trauma. I went to therapy. I changed my phone number again, and I even considered moving to a different state. I was terrified that Willie would find me again, that he would never stop until he had hurt me or someone I loved. Then one day, I got a call from the police. They had found Willie. He was dead. Apparently, he had been tracking me for months, using social media, public records, and even hacking into my phone. He had been obsessed with me, convinced that I was his soulmate, and that he needed to protect me from the evil men in my past. The police found him in his apartment, surrounded by pictures of me, newspaper clippings about my life, and weapons. He had taken his own life, leaving behind a note that said, "I did it for her. I protected her from the darkness." I was relieved that Willie was dead, that he could no longer hurt me or anyone else. But I was also deeply disturbed by what had happened. How could someone become so obsessed with me, so convinced that they knew what was best for me? It's been a few years since then, and I'm still trying to process everything that happened. I'm still afraid to date, to trust anyone completely. I know that not all men are like Willie, but I can't shake the fear that there's someone else out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to do me harm. I learned a lot from that experience, mostly about the dangers of online dating and the importance of trusting my instincts. But I also learned that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones who hide behind a charming smile and a well-crafted profile. And that, sometimes, the only way to protect yourself is to run. I still have the picture that Willie sent me, locked away in a box in my closet. I can't bring myself to throw it away, but I can't look at it either. It's a reminder of the darkness that exists in the world, and the importance of staying vigilant always. It reminds me that my intuition is key, and that I must remember that. I keep replaying this nightmare in my head, trying to find the moment where I should have seen the giant red flag waving in my face. It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion, knowing the impact is coming but being powerless to stop it. I've dated my fair share of women, some good, some bad, some just forgettable. But Stella was something else entirely. It started, like most things these days, online. A dating app, the kind where you swipe left or right based on a fleeting glance, and a carefully curated profile. Her pictures were stunning, not in a fake, filtered way, but genuinely beautiful. Long, dark hair, piercing green eyes, and a smile that looked both inviting and a little mischievous. Her bio was witty, mentioning her love for obscure indie films and her borderline unhealthy obsession with true crime podcasts. It felt like she was speaking directly to my soul. We matched, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about everything and nothing, bonding over our shared love of David Lynch movies and our mutual disdain for pineapple on pizza. She was smart, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. After a week of texting, I finally asked her out. She said yes without hesitation. Our first date was at a small, dimly lit cocktail bar downtown. I remember being nervous, fiddling with my tie, and rehearsing conversation starters in my head. But the moment I saw her, all my anxiety vanished. She looked even more beautiful in person, wearing a simple black dress that somehow managed to be both elegant and edgy. We talked for hours that night, about our families, our dreams, our fears. It felt like I had known her my whole life. We started seeing each other regularly after that. Movies, concerts, weekend hikes in the mountains. Everything felt perfect. I was falling hard, and I thought she was too. She'd laugh at my stupid jokes, hold my hand while we walked, and leave little notes for me on my doorstep. It was the kind of romance you read about in books, the kind you think only exists in movies. Looking back, there were subtle signs that something was off. Little quirks that I initially dismissed as charming or quirky. She was incredibly secretive about her past, always deflecting questions about her family or her childhood. She had a habit of disappearing for hours without explanation, only to reappear later with a vague apology and a promise that it wouldn't happen again. And she was intensely jealous, constantly checking my phone and questioning me about any female friends I had. I tried to ignore these red flags, blinded by the intensity of my feelings for her. I told myself that everyone has their flaws, that no one is perfect. I was so desperate for this relationship to work that I was willing to overlook anything. That was my first mistake. Things started to unravel slowly at first, then all at once. It began with small lies, little white lies that didn't seem like a big deal at the time. She'd tell me she was working late, only for me to find out later that she had been out with friends. She'd say she was visiting her sick aunt, but then her aunt would call me, confused, asking why Stella hadn't come by. The lies grew bolder, more elaborate. She started borrowing money from me, claiming she was short on rent or had unexpected medical bills. I gave it to her without hesitation, trusting that she would pay me back. But she never did. I didn't care about the money. It was the lying that hurt. It felt like she was building a wall between us, brick by brick. Then came the accusations. She started accusing me of cheating on her, of flirting with other women, of not caring about her feelings. The accusations were baseless, completely unfounded. I tried to reassure her, to tell her that I loved her and that I would never do anything to hurt her. But she wouldn't listen. She was convinced that I was betraying her, and nothing I could say would change her mind. One night, we were at my apartment, arguing about something I can't even remember now. The fight escalated quickly, turning into a screaming match. She was yelling, crying, accusing me of all sorts of things. I was trying to stay calm, to reason with her, but it was like talking to a brick wall. Suddenly, she stopped yelling and stared at me with this cold, vacant expression in her eyes. It was like she didn't even recognize me. She whispered, her voice barely audible. "You don't know who I really am, do you?" Before I could respond, she grabbed a kitchen knife and lunged at me. I reacted instinctively, dodging the blow and grabbing her wrist. We wrestled for the knife, both of us screaming and struggling. I managed to disarm her, throwing the knife across the room. She collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood there, frozen in shock, staring at her. I couldn't believe what had just happened. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, had just tried to kill me. I called the police, and they arrived within minutes. They took Stella into custody, and I spent the rest of the night at the police station, giving my statement. It felt like I was living in a nightmare, a twisted horror movie that I couldn't escape. The investigation revealed a disturbing truth about Stella. She had a history of mental illness, a long record of violent behavior. She had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and had spent time in psychiatric hospitals. She had a pattern of attaching herself to men, manipulating them, and then turning on them when they inevitably disappointed her. Her real name wasn't even Stella. It was Sarah. Stella was just one of the many identities she had created over the years, a mask she wore to lure unsuspecting victims into her web. I learned that she had lied about everything: her family, her job, her past. Everything was a fabrication, a carefully constructed illusion designed to deceive me. The woman I thought I loved didn't even exist. The trial was a blur. Stella pleaded insanity, and the court ordered her to be committed to a mental institution. I testified, recounting the events of that night, trying to make sense of the madness. It was like reliving the nightmare all over again. After the trial, I tried to move on with my life. I changed my phone number, moved to a new apartment, and started seeing a therapist. But the memories of Stella haunted me. I couldn't sleep without having nightmares. I couldn't trust anyone. I felt like I had been violated, not just physically but emotionally. It's been years since that night, but the scars remain. I still struggle with trust issues, with the fear that anyone I let into my life could turn out to be another Stella. I've tried dating again, but it's hard. I find myself constantly searching for red flags, for any sign that the woman I'm with is hiding something. I know I need to let go of the past, to forgive myself for being so blind and naive. But it's easier said than done. Stella took something from me that I don't think I'll ever get back. She shattered my innocence, my trust, my ability to love without fear. I keep replaying that nightmare in my head, wondering if I could have done something differently, if I could have seen the signs earlier, if I could have avoided the disaster. But I know the answer. Stella was a master manipulator, a skilled deceiver. She knew exactly how to play me, how to exploit my weaknesses. I was just another victim, another pawn in her twisted game. And the worst part is, I'll never truly understand why. She was my nightmare, but I can't fully come to terms with it. I keep thinking of her as a ghost, someone I knew. Yet in reality, she was a nightmare, and I had the pleasure of getting out of that situation alive. My heart still races when I remember the Paisley incident. It wasn't just one bad date. It was a series of escalating oddities that culminated in something I still can't fully explain, even to myself. I've always been a pretty grounded guy, logical, maybe even a bit boring. I work as a software engineer, which probably explains the boring part. I'm not one for ghost stories or conspiracy theories. I like things that make sense, things you can debug. But Paisley defied all logic. I met her on a dating app, nothing fancy, just the usual endless scroll. Her profile stood out because it was simple. Just a few pictures of her hiking, reading, and one slightly blurry shot of her laughing with friends. No filters, no over-the-top captions. She seemed real. Her bio just said, "Looking for someone to explore the world with, one bookstore at a time." I liked that. I sent her a message about a local bookstore I thought she might enjoy, and we started talking. Our conversations were easy, comfortable. We shared a similar sense of humor and a love for the outdoors. She was a writer, working on a novel, which I thought was cool. It was a welcome change from the usual small talk. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet for coffee. The coffee date was strange. Not bad, just off. She was beautiful, even more so than in her pictures. Long, dark hair, piercing green eyes, and a smile that could melt glaciers. But she was also incredibly nervous. She fidgeted constantly, avoided eye contact, and spoke in this soft, almost hesitant voice. I tried to make her feel comfortable, asking about her writing, her hikes, anything to break the ice. But her answers were vague, almost evasive. She'd change the subject quickly, or offer these cryptic little remarks that didn't really make sense. At one point, I asked her where she liked to hike, and she said, "Places where the trees remember things." I laughed, thinking she was being poetic, but she just stared at me with this intense, unblinking gaze that made me uneasy. Despite the weirdness, I was still drawn to her. There was something captivating about her, a vulnerability that made me want to protect her. Maybe I was just lonely, or maybe I was intrigued by the mystery, but I asked her out again. To my surprise, she said yes. Our second date was even stranger than the first. We went to a small, independent movie theater to see some foreign film I had never heard of. Paisley insisted it was important. The movie was bizarre, full of surreal imagery and disjointed scenes. I didn't understand half of it. Paisley, on the other hand, seemed completely engrossed. She even cried during one particularly strange scene involving a talking cat. After the movie, we went for a walk in a nearby park. The park was deserted, which added to the unsettling atmosphere. As we walked, Paisley started telling me about her novel. She said it was a story about a woman who could see the future, but only in her dreams. The woman was haunted by these visions of a coming apocalypse, and she had to find a way to stop it. The story was interesting, if a bit far-fetched, but as Paisley told it, her voice became more and more intense, her eyes shining with this almost manic energy. She started talking about the signs she was seeing in the real world, the omens that confirmed her novel's prophecy. She mentioned things like increased seismic activity, strange weather patterns, and a general sense of societal decay. It sounded like she actually believed this stuff. I tried to gently steer the conversation in a different direction, but she wouldn't let it go. She kept talking about the apocalypse, about the need to be prepared, about the importance of listening to your intuition. It was starting to freak me out. I made up some excuse about having an early morning at work and ended the date early. I should have stopped there. I should have cut my losses and moved on. But something about Paisley kept pulling me back. Maybe it was the damsel in distress thing, or maybe I was just curious to see how weird things could get. Whatever the reason, I agreed to a third date. This time, Paisley suggested we go for a hike. She said she wanted to show me a special place she had discovered in the woods outside of town. I hesitated, but she was so insistent, so pleading, that I couldn't bring myself to say no. The hike started out normally enough. We drove to a trailhead and started walking into the woods. The path was narrow and overgrown, and the trees were thick and gnarled. The air was heavy with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. As we walked deeper into the woods, Paisley became more and more animated. She pointed out different plants and animals, telling me their secret meanings. She said the woods were alive, that they were watching us, that they knew things we couldn't possibly imagine. After about an hour of hiking, we reached a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a large, ancient-looking oak tree. The tree was massive, its branches reaching up towards the sky like twisted arms. Paisley walked over to the tree and placed her hand on its trunk. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "This is it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "This is the place." "The place for what?" I asked, feeling a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. "The place where the veil is thin," she said, her eyes still closed. "The place where we can see the truth." I didn't like the sound of that. "Paisley, what are you talking about?" I asked, my voice rising in panic. She opened her eyes and looked at me, her gaze intense and unsettling. "I'm talking about the end, my name," she said. "The end is coming, and we need to be ready." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small, silver knife. "We need to make an offering," she said, her voice now calm and matter-of-fact, "to appease the spirits." I stared at the knife, my mind racing. "Paisley, put the knife down," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This isn't funny." She didn't move. "They want something precious," she said, her eyes fixed on me. "Something valuable." I knew I had to get out of there. I slowly backed away from her, my heart pounding in my chest. "I think I'm going to go," I said, turning to leave. "You can't leave," she said, her voice suddenly sharp and commanding. "You're part of this now." She lunged at me with the knife. I screamed and jumped out of the way. The knife grazed my arm, leaving a shallow cut. I ran. I ran as fast as I could, back the way we had come. I could hear Paisley behind me, shouting something about destiny and sacrifice. I didn't look back. I just kept running until I reached the trailhead. I called the police as soon as I got to my car. They took me to the station and took my statement. They sent officers into the woods to find Paisley. They found her near the oak tree, sitting cross-legged on the ground, humming to herself. She didn't resist arrest. I pressed charges. Paisley was charged with assault with a deadly weapon and several other offenses. She was eventually found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed to a mental institution. I haven't seen or heard from her since. I still think about her sometimes, about those strange dates, about the knife in the woods. I wonder if she was really crazy, or if she somehow tapped into something real, something beyond my comprehension. I still go on dates, but I'm a lot more cautious now. I do a thorough background check on every woman I meet, and I always have an escape plan. I haven't told many people about the Paisley incident. They wouldn't understand. They'd think I was crazy too. But I know what happened. I know what I saw. And I know that some things just can't be explained. Sometimes I lie awake at night, listening to the wind rustling through the trees outside my window, and I wonder if the trees remember. Let me tell you about a horrifying experience, one that has permanently scarred my view of dating and humanity in general. I'm not usually one for sharing these things, preferring to bury the bad memories deep down and pretend they never happened. But this one claws its way back to the surface every so often, usually when I'm least expecting it, like when I'm innocently scrolling through dating apps, or watching a rom-com, or even just walking past a certain type of car. It all started innocently enough. I was in my late 20s, single, and feeling the pressure from all sides. My family was constantly asking if I was seeing anyone. My friends were getting married and having babies, and I was starting to feel like I was falling behind. So, I did what any reasonable, slightly desperate, single person would do. I downloaded a dating app. I swiped through countless profiles, wincing at the shirtless gym selfies, the blatant lies about height, and the bios that consisted solely of emojis. But then I stumbled upon Donald's profile. He seemed normal. His pictures weren't overly posed or filtered. He had a kind smile, and his bio was witty and engaging. He mentioned his love for hiking, his passion for cooking, and his quirky interest in collecting vintage maps. I swiped right. We matched instantly, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He was funny, intelligent, and genuinely seemed interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything, our families, our jobs, our hobbies, our dreams. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet for coffee. The coffee date went well. He was even more charming in person, and we laughed and talked for hours. He walked me back to my car, and we shared a sweet, innocent kiss goodnight. I was smitten. I actually thought, maybe, just maybe, This could be something. We went on a few more dates after that. We went hiking, explored a local farmer's market, and even cooked dinner together at his apartment. He lived in a cute little bungalow in a quiet neighborhood. It was filled with vintage maps, just like he said, and smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books. Everything seemed perfect. Too perfect, maybe. That's when the little red flags started popping up, almost imperceptibly at first. He was a little too eager, a little too intense. He started texting me constantly, wanting to know where I was, what I was doing, who I was with. He would get subtly jealous when I mentioned spending time with my friends. At first, I chalked it up to him being really into me. I mean, who doesn't want to feel desired? But then it started to feel less like desire and more like possession. One night, I went out for drinks with my girlfriends. I told Donald about it beforehand, and he seemed okay with it. But as the night went on, he started blowing up my phone with texts and calls. He wanted to know every detail, who was there, what we were talking about, when I would be home. I tried to reassure him that I was just having a fun night with my friends and that I would see him tomorrow. When I finally got home, around midnight, he was waiting for me outside my apartment building. He looked angry, his eyes dark and intense. He accused me of ignoring him, of not caring about his feelings. I tried to explain that I just needed some space, that I couldn't be glued to my phone 24/7. He didn't listen. He kept yelling, his voice escalating with each word. I started to feel scared. I told him to leave, that I needed to go inside. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight and painful. He wouldn't let go. "Don't you understand?" he said, his voice low and menacing. "I love you. I need you. You're mine." I managed to wrench my arm away from him and ran inside my apartment, slamming the door shut and locking it behind me. I peeked through the peephole, and he was still standing there, staring at my door. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I called him and told him that we were done, that I couldn't be with someone who was so controlling and possessive. He didn't take it well. He begged me to reconsider, promising to change, to be better. But I stood my ground. I told him that I needed space and that I didn't want to see him again. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. He started showing up at my work, waiting for me outside my office building. He would send me dozens of emails and text messages every day, ranging from apologies and declarations of love to angry threats and accusations. He even started contacting my friends and family, trying to convince them to talk me into giving him another chance. I blocked his number, changed my email address, and warned my friends and family not to engage with him. But he wouldn't give up. He created fake social media accounts to stalk me, leaving creepy comments on my posts and sending me disturbing messages. I started to feel like I was living in a horror movie. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid of what he might do next. I was losing sleep, losing weight, losing my mind. I felt trapped, helpless, and utterly terrified. One day, I came home from work to find my apartment door ajar. My heart leaped into my throat. I cautiously pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was a mess. Furniture was overturned, drawers were pulled out, and clothes were scattered everywhere. It looked like someone had ransacked the place. Then I saw him. He was sitting in my living room, in my favorite armchair, holding a knife. He looked up at me, his eyes vacant and unhinged. "Donald," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I just wanted to talk," he said, his voice eerily calm. "I just wanted you to understand how much I love you." I knew in that moment that I was in serious danger. I had to get out of there. I slowly backed away, trying to keep my eyes locked on him. "Please, Donald," I said. "Just leave. Leave me alone." He stood up, the knife glinting in his hand. "I can't," he said. "You're mine. I won't let you go." I turned and ran, screaming for help. I burst out of my apartment and into the hallway, banging on my neighbors' doors. Luckily, one of them was home and opened their door. I stumbled inside, gasping for breath, and told them what was happening. They immediately called the police, who arrived within minutes. They apprehended Donald, who was still in my apartment, rambling incoherently. He was arrested and charged with stalking, harassment, and breaking and entering. It took months for me to recover from that experience. I moved to a new apartment, changed my phone number again, and started seeing a therapist to deal with the trauma. I was diagnosed with PTSD and struggled with anxiety and panic attacks for a long time. The trial was a nightmare. Donald pleaded not guilty, claiming that he was just misunderstood, that he never meant to hurt me. But the evidence was overwhelming, and he was eventually convicted on all counts. He was sentenced to several years in prison. Even now, years later, I still struggle with the aftermath of that relationship. I'm terrified of dating, afraid of trusting anyone again. I have trouble sleeping, and I often have nightmares about Donald. I know that I'll never be the same person I was before I met him. The experience taught me a valuable lesson, that you can never truly know someone, no matter how charming or seemingly normal they may appear. It also taught me the importance of trusting your gut, of recognizing red flags, and of prioritizing your safety above all else. I hope that by sharing my story, I can help others avoid a similar fate. Dating can be a minefield, but it's important to remember that you are not alone. If you ever find yourself in a situation that feels unsafe or uncomfortable, don't hesitate to seek help. There are people who care about you and want to support you. You deserve to be safe, happy, and loved. Never forget that. This is why you should always trust your gut. I know, it sounds cliché, like something your mom would say, but seriously, if something feels off, there's probably a good reason. I learned that lesson the hard way, courtesy of a guy named Andrew and a dating app I'm now convinced is a portal to the seventh circle of hell. I was in a dating slump. You know the feeling. Endless swiping, boring conversations that go nowhere, and the occasional disastrous first date that makes you question your life choices. I was starting to think I was destined to be single forever, surrounded by cats and a mountain of unread books. So naturally, I re-downloaded a dating app, lured back by the false promise of finding the one. That's where I met Andrew. His profile was intriguing, not in a super obvious way. He wasn't conventionally attractive, kind of nerdy, with a slightly awkward smile and glasses that were perpetually sliding down his nose. But his bio was funny and self-deprecating, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me beyond my favorite pizza topping. He claimed to be a software developer, which, okay, maybe not the most exciting job in the world, but at least it meant he probably had a steady income. Our conversations were easy, surprisingly so. We talked about books, movies, music, and our shared love of obscure documentaries. He seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, and he actually listened instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. It was refreshing. After a week or so of chatting, he asked me out. Now, my gut was already giving me a little nudge. There was something about Andrew that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Maybe it was the slightly intense way he looked at me in his profile pictures, or the fact that he seemed a little too eager to agree with everything I said. But I ignored it. I was tired of being alone, and he seemed nice enough. I told myself I was just being paranoid. We decided to meet for coffee at a local cafe. I arrived a few minutes early, and when Andrew walked in, I was immediately struck by how different he looked in person. His glasses were dirtier than they appeared in his photos, his clothes were rumpled, and he had this nervous energy that made him fidget constantly. Still, I tried to be positive. The coffee date started off okay. We made small talk, laughed at a few jokes, and even found a few more things in common. But as the conversation went on, things started to get weird. He began asking me a lot of personal questions, way more than you'd expect on a first date. Where did I live? What was my daily routine like? Did I have any roommates? Did I have any security cameras in my apartment? He framed them as innocent inquiries, just getting to know me better, but they made me deeply uncomfortable. Then, he started talking about his ex-girlfriend. Now, I know it's a dating faux pas to bring up exes on a first date, but this was next level. He went on and on about how she had betrayed him, how she was a liar and a manipulator. He said he had trusted her completely, and she had broken his heart. He said he was afraid of getting hurt again. It was a total sob story, and it was incredibly awkward. I tried to steer the conversation in a different direction, but he kept bringing it back to his ex. He seemed obsessed with her. Eventually, I just excused myself to go to the bathroom, hoping he'd get the hint that I wasn't interested. When I came back, he was gone. Relieved, I paid for my coffee and headed home, figuring I'd just block his number and move on. I didn't think anything more of it until the next day. I woke up to a series of text messages from Andrew. They started out normal enough. Good morning. Hope you slept well. But then they got progressively weirder. He said he had been thinking about me all night, that he felt a deep connection between us, and that he knew we were meant to be together. I ignored the messages, hoping he'd get the hint. But he didn't stop. He kept texting me throughout the day, sending increasingly desperate and obsessive messages. He said he wanted to see me again, that he needed to see me again, that he couldn't live without me. I was starting to get genuinely scared. I blocked his number, but he just started messaging me on the dating app. I blocked him there too, but I knew that wasn't going to stop him. That night, I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when I heard a noise outside my window. I live on the second floor of an apartment building, so it's not like someone could just casually walk up to my window. I peeked through the blinds, and I saw him. Andrew was standing on the sidewalk below, staring up at my window. He was holding a bouquet of flowers and a creepy, oversized teddy bear. He looked like something out of a horror movie. I immediately called the police. They arrived a few minutes later and took Andrew into custody. I gave them a statement, explaining everything that had happened. They said they would look into it, but that unless he had actually threatened me, there wasn't much they could do. I was terrified. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my apartment, jumping at every sound. I knew I couldn't stay there. I needed to get out. The next morning, I packed a bag and went to stay with my sister. I didn't tell her everything that had happened, just that I needed a place to crash for a few days. I didn't want to scare her. While I was at my sister's, I started doing some research on Andrew. I found his social media profiles, which were mostly empty. But then I found something else, a forum where people shared their dating horror stories. And there he was. Several women had posted about similar experiences with a guy named Andrew. They described the same obsessive behavior, the same creepy questions, the same sob stories about his ex-girlfriend. One woman even said that he had followed her home from a date and harassed her for weeks afterward. I felt sick to my stomach. I realized that I had dodged a bullet. I could have been one of those women. I went back to my apartment a few days later, after the police assured me that Andrew was no longer a threat. I changed the locks, installed a security system, and started carrying pepper spray everywhere I went. I was determined to reclaim my life. But the experience changed me. I was more cautious, more guarded, less trusting. I still used dating apps, but I was much more selective about who I matched with. I listened to my gut, and I didn't ignore the red flags. I never saw Andrew again, but I'll never forget him. He taught me a valuable lesson about trusting my instincts and protecting myself. And he reminded me that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones who look perfectly normal on the outside. A few months later, I met someone else. His name was Mark. He was kind, funny, and respectful. He didn't ask me weird questions or talk about his ex-girlfriend. He just wanted to get to know me. I was hesitant at first, but I decided to give him a chance. And you know what? It worked out. We've been together for 2 years now, and I'm happier than I've ever been. So yeah, always trust your gut. It might save your life. It might also lead you to the love of your life. You never know. This happened to me a few months ago, and I still shudder a little when I think about it. I mean, I've had my share of dating disasters. The guy who spent the entire evening talking about his ex. The one who showed up wearing a fedora and cargo shorts. The one who tried to convince me that the earth was flat. But this was something else entirely. I'd been single for about a year, focusing on my career and generally enjoying my own company. But I started to feel that little pang of loneliness, that yearning for connection. So, like any self-respecting millennial, I decided to dip my toes back into the online dating pool. I reactivated my Bumble account, swiped through a few faces, and matched with a guy named Keith. Keith seemed normal. Refreshingly so, actually. His profile was straightforward. His pictures were decent. No shirtless gym selfies, thank God. And his bio was witty and self-deprecating. He worked as a software engineer, liked hiking and craft beer, and had a dog named Winston. On paper, he was pretty much my ideal guy. We chatted for a few days, and the conversation flowed easily. He was funny, intelligent, and genuinely seemed interested in getting to know me. We bonded over our shared love of bad reality TV and our mutual disdain for brunch crowds. After a week of texting, he suggested we meet up for a drink. I hesitated for a minute. I always get a little anxious before first dates, but I decided to go for it. We agreed to meet at a trendy cocktail bar downtown. I arrived a few minutes early and snagged a table. I was a little nervous, but also excited. Maybe, just maybe, this could be something good. Keith arrived right on time, and he looked even better in person than he did in his pictures. He was tall, with kind eyes and a warm smile. He gave me a hug, and I immediately felt at ease. The first hour of the date was perfect. We talked about everything and nothing, laughing and sharing stories. He was charming and attentive, and I found myself genuinely enjoying his company. He even asked thoughtful questions about my work and my hobbies, actually listening to my answers, instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. It was honestly one of the best first dates I'd been on in a long time. But then, things started to get weird. It started subtly. He began asking me increasingly personal questions, things that felt a little too intense for a first date. He wanted to know about my childhood, my past relationships, my deepest fears and insecurities. I tried to deflect, making light of some of the questions and politely declining to answer others. But he was persistent. He kept pressing, digging deeper and deeper, until I started to feel uncomfortable. Then he started talking about his ex. Now, I know everyone has baggage, and it's normal to mention an ex in passing, but Keith went on and on about her. He described their relationship in excruciating detail, recounting every fight, every disappointment, every heartbreak. He painted her as this manipulative, toxic monster who had ruined his life. I tried to be sympathetic, but it was exhausting. And frankly, it was a major red flag. As the evening wore on, Keith's behavior became increasingly erratic. He started fidgeting, tapping his fingers on the table, and glancing around the bar nervously. He kept ordering drinks, even though it was clear he was already getting a little tipsy. He started slurring his words and repeating himself. Then, out of nowhere, he grabbed my hand and started squeezing it tightly. "You're different," he said, his eyes fixed on mine. "You're not like her. You understand me." I tried to pull my hand away, but he wouldn't let go. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Keith," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "you're hurting me. Please let go." He didn't respond. He just kept staring at me, his eyes filled with this strange, intense emotion that I couldn't quite decipher. I started to feel scared. This wasn't the charming, witty guy I had met just a few hours ago. This was someone else entirely. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he released my hand. He blinked a few times, as if snapping out of a trance. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "I didn't mean to." I stood up abruptly. "I think I should go," I said, grabbing my purse. "No, please don't," he pleaded, reaching for my arm. "Just give me another chance. I can explain." I pulled away from him. "I don't think so," I said firmly. "I'm not feeling well." I turned and walked out of the bar, leaving him sitting there alone. I didn't look back. I called an Uber and waited outside, shivering in the cold. I felt shaken and disoriented, like I had just narrowly escaped some kind of disaster. When the Uber arrived, I practically jumped into the back seat and told the driver to take me home as quickly as possible. As soon as I got back to my apartment, I locked the door and collapsed onto my couch. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I replayed the date in my mind, trying to make sense of Keith's strange behavior. The more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. I decided to do a little online sleuthing. I Googled Keith's name and found his LinkedIn profile. Everything seemed to check out. He really was a software engineer, and he had worked at the company he had mentioned. But then I stumbled across something else, an online forum dedicated to exposing abusive and predatory men. And there, plain as day, was Keith's name, along with several disturbing allegations from women who claimed he had harassed, stalked, and even physically assaulted them. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I scrolled through the forum, reading the accounts of these women, and I realized that Keith's behavior on our date wasn't just weird. It was a pattern. He had used the same tactics on them, the same intense questions, the same sob stories about his ex, the same sudden bursts of anger and possessiveness. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, consumed by fear and anxiety. I kept checking my locks, peeking out the window, and jumping at every little sound. I felt violated and vulnerable, like I had been targeted by someone dangerous. The next morning, I went to the police and filed a report. I told them everything that had happened, showed them the forum, and provided them with Keith's contact information. They took my report seriously and promised to investigate. A few days later, I received a call from the detective assigned to my case. He informed me that they had contacted Keith and questioned him about the allegations. Keith had denied everything, claiming that the women were lying and that he was the victim of a smear campaign. The detective said that they didn't have enough evidence to arrest Keith, but they were keeping an eye on him. They advised me to stay away from him and to contact him immediately if he tried to contact me. I spent the next few weeks living in a state of constant paranoia. I changed my phone number, deactivated my social media accounts, and installed a security system in my apartment. I avoided going out alone, and I always made sure to tell someone where I was going and when I would be back. I knew that I couldn't let Keith control my life, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching me. I had nightmares about him breaking into my apartment, about him stalking me on the street, about him hurting me or someone I loved. Eventually, the fear started to subside. I began to feel safe again, to reclaim my life. I started going out more, seeing my friends, and focusing on my work. I even considered reactivating my dating profiles, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. The experience with Keith had left me scarred, distrustful of men, and wary of online dating. A few months later, I received another call from the detective. He informed me that Keith had been arrested on charges of stalking and harassment. Another woman had come forward with similar allegations, and this time, the police had enough evidence to take action. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Finally, Keith was being held accountable for his actions. I knew that his arrest wouldn't erase the trauma I had experienced, but it gave me a sense of closure, a feeling that justice had been served. I'm still dealing with the aftermath of the experience. I have trust issues, I struggle with anxiety, and I'm hesitant to put myself out there again. But I'm also stronger, more resilient, and more aware of the red flags that I might have missed before. I learned a valuable lesson from my dating horror story, that not everyone is who they seem to be online, and that it's important to trust your instincts, even if they seem irrational. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't be afraid to walk away, to protect yourself, and to seek help if you need it. I'm sharing my story not for sympathy, but to raise awareness and to empower other women to speak out about their experiences. We need to create a culture where victims are believed, where predators are held accountable, and where everyone feels safe and respected. Dating can be a minefield, but it doesn't have to be a terrifying experience. By being informed, cautious, and supportive of each other, we can make the dating world a safer and more enjoyable place for everyone. And maybe, just maybe, we can find love along the way. You won't believe what happened to me. Seriously, I still have a hard time wrapping my head around it. I've had some rough dating experiences. Don't get me wrong. Awkward silences, bad breath, accidentally spilling a glass of red wine down someone's white dress, the usual stuff. But this was on another level. This was straight-up psychological thriller material. Okay, so let me set the scene. I'm a pretty normal guy, I think. Mid-30s, got my own place, decent job, into hiking and craft beer. I'd been single for a while, bouncing between short-term things, and just being on my own. Eventually, I decided to give the whole online dating thing another shot. I tried before with mixed results, but figured why not? Maybe this time would be different. I set up a profile on one of the popular apps, swiped left and right for a few days, and eventually matched with a woman named Samantha. She was striking. Long dark hair, intense eyes, and a smile that looked both inviting and a little bit dangerous. Her profile said she was an artist, liked vintage movies, and was looking for someone adventurous and open-minded. We started chatting, and I was immediately drawn in. She was smart, funny, and had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the world she was talking to. We talked about everything, our families, our dreams, our fears. It felt different than any other online connection I'd had. More real, more intense. After a week or so of chatting, we decided to meet up for a date. She suggested this little-known cocktail bar in the Arts District, a place I'd never heard of. I looked it up online, and it seemed cool, dimly lit, quirky decor, good reviews. I was excited. I got to the bar a few minutes early, found a table, and ordered a drink. I was a little nervous, but mostly excited. I really felt like there was something special about Samantha. Then she walked in, and I swear, my heart skipped a beat. She looked even more stunning in person. She was wearing this vintage dress that fit her perfectly, and her eyes sparkled in the dim light. The date started off great. We talked and laughed, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. She told me about her art, these intricate, almost surreal paintings that sounded fascinating. I told her about my job and my hobbies, and she seemed genuinely interested. But as the night went on, things started to get weird. It started subtly. She began asking me these very personal questions, things you wouldn't normally ask on a first date. Questions about my childhood, my past relationships, my deepest insecurities. At first, I chalked it up to her being open-minded, but the questions kept getting more and more invasive. Then she started making these strange comments. Little things like, "I feel like I've known you forever," or, "It's like we're meant to be together." Again, I tried to brush it off, but it was starting to make me uncomfortable. The biggest red flag came when she excused herself to go to the restroom. While she was gone, I noticed her purse sitting on the table. Curiosity got the better of me, and I peeked inside. I know. It was a total invasion of privacy, but I couldn't help myself. Inside her purse, I found a small notebook. I opened it up, and what I saw made my blood run cold. It was filled with notes about me, detailed descriptions of my appearance, my habits, my conversations with her. It was like she was studying me. There was also a sketch of my apartment building, with a circle drawn around my unit. And then I saw it. Underneath the sketch, in bold letters, was written, "He's perfect." I slammed the notebook shut and shoved it back into her purse. My mind was racing. What the hell was going on? Was she stalking me? Was this some kind of elaborate prank? She came back from the restroom a few minutes later, smiling as if nothing was wrong. I tried to act normal, but I was completely freaked out. I made up some excuse about having an early meeting the next day and said I needed to go. She looked disappointed, but she didn't argue. As I was walking out of the bar, she grabbed my hand and said, "Don't forget about me. We have so much more to explore together." Her grip was surprisingly strong, and her eyes were intense. I got home and immediately changed the locks on my apartment. I was paranoid, convinced that she was going to show up at any minute. I spent the entire night tossing and turning, trying to figure out what to do. The next day, I did some digging. I looked up Samantha online, but I couldn't find anything about her. No social media profiles, no mentions in any online art galleries, nothing. It was like she didn't exist. I even tried reverse image searching her photos, but nothing came up. That's when I decided to go to the police. I told them everything that had happened, showed them the messages we'd exchanged, and described the notebook I'd seen in her purse. They took me seriously, but they said there wasn't much they could do without more evidence. They suggested I file a restraining order, but I needed her full name and address to do that, which I didn't have. For the next few weeks, I lived in a state of constant anxiety. I was afraid to leave my apartment, afraid to answer the phone, afraid to even open my mail. I felt like I was being watched, like Samantha was always just around the corner. Then, one night, I got a knock on my door. I peeked through the peephole, and there she was, Samantha, smiling that same unsettling smile. I didn't open the door. I just stood there, frozen in fear. She knocked again, louder this time. "I know you're in there," she said, her voice low and menacing. "We need to talk." I didn't say anything. I just stood there, listening to her knock and plead and eventually scream. After what felt like an eternity, she finally gave up and left. I called the police again, told them what had happened. They sent a patrol car to my apartment, but Samantha was long gone. They searched the area, but they couldn't find her. I knew I couldn't stay in my apartment any longer. I packed up my things and moved in with my sister. I felt safer there, knowing I wasn't alone. A few weeks later, I got a call from the police. They said they'd found Samantha. She was living in a storage unit on the outskirts of the city. When they raided the unit, they found a disturbing collection of items. Photos of me, articles about me, even some of my personal belongings that I hadn't realized were missing. They also found a detailed plan for how she was going to kidnap me and hold me captive in the storage unit. She had even rigged the unit with soundproofing and surveillance equipment. It turned out that Samantha had a long history of stalking and harassing men. She had a fixation on finding her perfect match, and when she found someone who fit her criteria, she would become obsessed. She had been doing this for years, moving from city to city, leaving a trail of terrified victims in her wake. The police arrested Samantha, and she was eventually charged with stalking, harassment, and attempted kidnapping. She was found mentally unstable and was committed to a psychiatric facility. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought I could finally put this nightmare behind me. But I was wrong. A few months later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Samantha. She had somehow managed to get my address at my sister's. The letter was rambling and incoherent, filled with delusional ramblings about how we were meant to be together and how she would never give up on me. It ended with the chilling words, "I'll be waiting for you." I immediately contacted the police, told them about the letter. They said they would look into it, but there wasn't much they could do since she was already in a mental institution. I'm still scared. I know she's in a facility, but I can't shake the feeling that she's still out there, watching me, waiting for her chance. I've changed my name, moved to a new city, and cut off contact with everyone I know. I'm living in constant fear, always looking over my shoulder, wondering if she's going to find me. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever be able to live a normal life again. But one thing I do know is that I'll never trust anyone I meet online again. Some connections are best left unexplored. Some doors are best left unopened. And some smiles can hide the darkest intentions. It started as a way to find a partner, but it ended up with me running for my life. The dating scene of my early 20s. I'd had my share of awkward dates, mismatched personalities, and general disappointments. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for Catherine. It started like any other modern romance, a swipe right, a witty exchange of messages, and the hopeful anticipation of a first date. Catherine was stunning in her pictures, fiery red hair, piercing green eyes, and a smile that could melt glaciers. Her profile mentioned a shared love for classic literature, obscure indie bands, and hiking in the mountains. I was hooked. Our initial conversations were electric. We debated the merits of Kerouac versus Ginsberg, shared our favorite hiking trails, and discovered a mutual obsession with a band that literally no one else I knew had ever heard of. She seemed intelligent, funny, and genuinely interested in me. I felt like I had finally found someone who truly got me. We planned our first date, a picnic in a local park, followed by a visit to a used bookstore. I remember being incredibly nervous, meticulously planning my outfit, and rehearsing conversation starters in the mirror. I wanted everything to be perfect. She arrived precisely on time, radiating an undeniable aura of confidence and charisma. She looked even more beautiful in person, her red hair cascading down her shoulders, her green eyes sparkling in the sunlight. The picnic was a success. We laughed, shared stories, and discovered even more shared interests. The bookstore was equally enjoyable as we browsed the shelves, recommending our favorite authors and exchanging witty banter. By the end of the date, I was completely smitten. I walked her back to her car, and we shared a passionate kiss that left me breathless. I floated home that night, convinced that I'd just met the girl of my dreams. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of dates, adventures, and increasingly intense emotions. We went to concerts, explored art museums, and even took a weekend camping trip to the mountains. Catherine was adventurous, spontaneous, and incredibly affectionate. She showered me with compliments, told me how amazing I was, and made me feel like the most special person in the world. Looking back, I can see that I was blinded by her charm, completely oblivious to the warning signs that were slowly starting to emerge. She had a tendency to be overly possessive, constantly wanting to know where I was, who I was with, and what I was doing. She would get jealous if I spent time with my friends, accusing me of neglecting her. She also had a dark side, a volatile temper that would erupt without warning. She would fly into rages over the smallest things, a misplaced sock, a wrong turn on the road, a perceived slight in my tone of voice. During these outbursts, she would hurl insults, scream profanities, and even physically lash out. At first, I dismissed these outbursts as mere quirks, attributing them to stress or past trauma. I told myself that she was just misunderstood, that she needed my love and support to heal. I was determined to be the perfect boyfriend, to be the one who could finally tame her inner demons. But as time went on, her behavior escalated. The possessiveness became suffocating, the temper more frequent and unpredictable. She started isolating me from my friends and family, convincing me that they didn't understand our relationship, that they were jealous of our love. She also began to manipulate me emotionally, using guilt, threats, and even self-harm to control me. She would threaten to break up with me if I didn't do what she wanted, or she would claim that she couldn't live without me, that she would kill herself if I ever left her. I was trapped in a cycle of fear, guilt, and obligation. I knew that her behavior was unhealthy, that I needed to get out of the relationship, but I was too afraid to leave. I was afraid of what she might do to herself, to me, or to the people I cared about. The breaking point came one night after we had an argument about a party I wanted to attend with my friends. Catherine forbade me from going, claiming that she needed me, that she couldn't be alone. I tried to reason with her, explaining that I had already promised my friends that I would be there, but she wouldn't listen. She flew into a rage, screaming at me, throwing things around the apartment, and eventually collapsing into a sobbing mess on the floor. I tried to comfort her, but she pushed me away, accusing me of not loving her, of not caring about her feelings. In a moment of weakness, I gave in. I told her that I wouldn't go to the party, that I would stay with her instead. She immediately stopped crying, her eyes hardening with a sense of triumph. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, I realized that I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't live my life walking on eggshells, constantly fearing her next outburst. I had to break free, even if it meant risking her wrath. The next morning, I waited until she was asleep, then quietly packed my belongings and slipped out of the apartment. I left a note on the kitchen table, explaining that I couldn't continue the relationship, that I needed to focus on my own well-being. I fully expected her to come after me, to bombard me with calls, texts, and threats. But nothing happened. For days, I heard nothing from her. I started to think that maybe, just maybe, I had finally escaped. Then, one evening, I received a package in the mail. It was a small, intricately wrapped box. My heart pounding, I carefully opened it. Inside, I found a single photograph, a picture of me sleeping in Catherine's bed. On the back of the photo, scrawled in red ink, were the words, "I'm always watching." I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew that I was not safe, that Catherine was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for her opportunity to strike. I immediately contacted the police, reported the incident, and filed a restraining order against her. The police took my concerns seriously. They launched an investigation, monitoring Catherine's movements and searching her apartment. They found disturbing evidence, photos of me, my friends, and my family, along with maps of my neighborhood and detailed notes about my daily routine. They also discovered a hidden room in her basement, filled with weapons, surveillance equipment, and disturbing artwork depicting scenes of violence and torture. It was clear that Catherine was not just a possessive girlfriend. She was a deeply disturbed and potentially dangerous individual. The police arrested Catherine and charged her with stalking, harassment, and making terrorist threats. She was eventually found guilty and sentenced to a lengthy prison term. Even though she is now behind bars, I still live in fear. I know that she will eventually be released, and I worry about what she might do when that day comes. I have nightmares about her, vivid dreams in which she stalks me, torments me, and ultimately tries to kill me. I have learned a lot from this experience. I have learned to recognize the warning signs of a toxic relationship, to trust my instincts, and to prioritize my own safety and well-being above all else. I have also learned that some people are simply beyond help, that no amount of love or compassion can tame their inner demons. I will never forget Catherine, or the nightmare she brought into my life. Her face is forever etched into my memory, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of even the most beautiful exteriors. And I replay the nightmare in my head, hoping that one day, maybe, it won't scare me so much anymore. I haven't really dated since. I still see the photo from time to time. Every now and then I move cities. I don't think I'll ever feel truly safe.